Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by developing yourself, developing your skills, your network, your habits, and more. I'm your host, Aaron Haslip, and today we're going to be talking to Edward Barton. Edward is a former student of mine who landed his first software engineering job after graduating our program. Edward still works at his first company, Untappd, where he's continued to grow his career one line of code and one beer at a time. All right. Edward, thanks so much, man, for taking the time to do the podcast. I really wanted to have you on because though I don't know the details of your whole story, I remember meeting you before you were ever, the mega successful software engineer that you are now. I recall our first meeting was at a meetup that I think it was actually the first meetup I ever put on, or hosted it. It was at Full Steam here in Durham. But yeah, man, tell me a little bit about that part of your life before you became a software engineer, before you, I guess you were were you a TA for Project Shift? No, you were a student first and then you were a TA. But what got you into coding? I mean, how did you even think about it as a job, and what was your background up to that point?
Yeah, so funnily enough, I actually was just talking about this yesterday with a friend about my kind of story and upbringing into the software world. But yeah, so I moved to North Carolina about 5 years ago, and I got a job at a local startup called Plotwat, and I was what was known as an implementation engineer, which was just essentially a fancy name for an onboarding specialist. And I was there for 2 years, and then they were acquired, and they got rid of everybody except the three kind of founders. And so I was at a point in my life where I was like, where do I go from here? I have a degree in economics. I've kind of job hopped. I did tech support. I did this onboarding for a bit, and I didn't really feel like I had any specialized skills. I wasn't a lawyer or an accountant or an engineer or anything like that. So I was like, where do I go? And during Plotwat, I had kind of gotten that learn to code itch. So I did the Code Academy stuff. I did the free code camp, and I started to run local meetups, doing coffees and codes and whatnot. And I said, now's probably time to pursue this a little bit more seriously. And then that's kind of when you entered my life and we did that Full Steam thing. And you're like, hey, I see you do these meetups. Would you want to do some meetups with Project Shift? I'm like, heck yeah, I would. So we did some meetups together. We did some coffee and codes. We did some workshops. We did, a little bit of everything. And then, did that for about three to 6 months. And then I was like, I want to go through the code school. It's time. It's time to commit to this and change my career, change my life. And did the boot camp for 12 weeks, did TA for another 12 weeks, and then landed this job. I was very fortunate in that regard. One application, one job. I don't recommend that strategy because it never works. But I was very fortunate to end up where I am today.
That's awesome, man. I want to dig into some of those details because, you actually are one of the stories I use, by the way, of graduates of our program who are looking at job descriptions, and the job descriptions might say, hey, you need 2 or 3 years, or you need to be a senior. And if I remember correctly, you applied for a senior Rails position.
Yes.
And you were neither senior nor did you know Rails.
No. I just knew the company because it's Untappd.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm a beer drinker. I know these guys. It sounds cool. And they worked a floor ahead of us, on top of us at Project Shift. And so I applied. It was like a senior Rails position with 3 years of experience. And I just applied blindly and then walked up there and made friends with a couple of developers, and they started advocating for me. And sure enough, I got the position after 7 rounds of interviews.
That's amazing. Yeah, I remember their interview process was pretty intense. So, okay, stepping back. So you graduated with a degree in economics. What were you thinking you were going to do with it when you did graduate? Were you thinking about tech already?
No. So initially, I was doing tech support for 6 years in Pennsylvania before I moved to North Carolina. And when I got my degree in econ, I thought I wanted to be a business or a financial analyst. And then out of college, I quickly realized that spreadsheets were monotonous and very boring. And crunching data like that was not very exciting. So I moved down here and I just looked for something, something in the startup field, something tech related. And I found Plotwat and kind of, once again, blindly applied. Didn't really meet the requirements, but they gave me a chance, and And then, yeah, kind of the rest is history from there.
That's amazing. So what originally got you on to like how'd you learn about free code camp or even this idea that you could learn this skill and become a software engineer versus, doing implementation or tech support or whatever else that you were, kind of hopping between?
Yeah, so I never really gave much thought to actual software development until probably I moved down to North Carolina and and then I just started like I think a lot of people do, a Google search, learn to code, and as soon as you type that in, you're going to get bombarded with Code Academy and Free Code Camp and Treehouse and all those things. And I was like, well, let's take a look at this. I've never really
Yeah.
considered it, and I started where everyone does with my first Hello World and doing some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then from there, once I got into JavaScript and developed my first weather application on Free Code Camp, I was like, this is pretty rad. Like,
Cool.
I just wrote this and it's doing something. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay. So the first time you actually ever wrote a line of code was through free code camp.
Yeah. Yep.
And did you feel at that point immediately fairly confident or because, I think whenever I was first learning to code, because I remember that experience, I thought, whoa, this is way out of my league. Like I'm excited about the potential, but I wasn't sure if I had the aptitude. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes and no. Not so much when it was HTML and CSS. I felt like I zipped through that. I don't
Yeah,
know. For
sure.
me, it kind of came pretty easily. Once I started hitting JavaScript, though, and we're learning about like conditionals and looping and all these sorts of new pieces of the pie, that's where I started to be like, whoa, okay, this is kind of getting a little daunting. But I just
Yeah,
kept grinding, and sure enough, day by day, you make progress.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think that's like one of my typical speeches is a lot of people start off with HTML and CSS, which is great, but because it's this, immediate feedback loop of I did this thing and now the picture changes.
Yep.
But then you get to JavaScript, which is completely different, and suddenly
Yep.
people, because that's normally what they start you off with too, is JavaScript, versus Python or anything else. They would all be the same, but then it's a logical programming language, and you kind of get hit over the head because now you're having to learn the entirety of loops and then the entirety of functions, and you just don't know what these things are for
Hmm.
until you have to learn them all and then build something with it, which sounds like is what you did at that point. So, okay, you're kind of learning on your own. And I actually remember you during this time because you were being a good friend. Honestly, you were coming to stuff. You were involved in the community. You were helping out. You were still working at Plot Watt. And then at one point, we don't have to go into all of the story. I forget exactly what happened about we were going to bring you on board and then we didn't or something. But you ended up being a student. How did that go? Like, because, assuming you were making some progress on free code camp, and I want you to be honest with this answer, not just to like prop up, what Project Shift or Parsity or what I do, but what
Yeah.
made you decide, okay, the quickest route to being a software engineer isn't going through just free code camp on my own. It's going through a program, like Project Shift. What made you decide for that?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been doing the whole self-teaching thing for months, actually probably years. Like I said, I was doing it in Plot Watt until you guys showed up, and I didn't want to do it on my own, so I held those meetups, and I was getting some success there, getting people along for the ride. But it kind of came to a point where I felt like, okay, I'm like halfway in, I'm halfway committed to this. I have one foot in, not the other. So I was
Yeah.
like, if I want to actually pursue this as a career and change my career, change my life, actually have something to work towards, again, I felt lost at that time.
Yeah.
I didn't feel specialized. And I was like, if I'm going to make this happen, then I need to fully commit to it. And I was like, I think something like a 12-week program where I'm 100% in working 40, 60, 80 hours a week. That's the best way to do it,
Yeah.
and you're 100% focused on it. So that was kind of the big plunge for me was like if I want to do this, I need to actually commit to it.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I would say that you're sort of the ideal student. I think sometimes students come in and they just want the career change. They want the results, but not necessarily they don't enjoy the process. But you seem to be one who enjoyed the process. What do you think you attribute that to? Like the fact that you were dedicated.
Yeah. I mean, for me, man, I really enjoyed like I really enjoy the aspects that come along with software development. The fact that we're constantly solving problems, the fact that what I call when I go into code mode, I just lose track of time. I mean, I'm at my keyboard for hours on end, and next thing I know, it's 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff's fun for me. The fact that you're constantly being challenged, you're never going to stop learning because there's a new JS library released every day. So I mean, I love that. So it was kind of easy to keep that motivation. And it's, in that sort of setting at the code school to have others that you're surrounded by that are going through the same struggles as you, the same
Yeah.
victories as
Yeah.
you, like that's also really encouraging. So it's fun to bounce ideas and work together and pair program, hit the highs, hit the lows. It's it's kind of easy to keep the motivation when that stuff's going on.
Yeah. That's amazing, man. And okay, so let's fast forward to where you left off. So I remember this again, and I think the reason why you said that you wouldn't advise your job search to be the job search is because normally most people, and this is what we see, you can see this on LinkedIn all the time, and this is the advice that we preach, right? If you are a career changer and you cold apply for a job, there's just almost no chance you're going to get it because your experience doesn't say you have anything, or your resume doesn't say you have any experience. But you did do a little bit more than that, right? You went and actually talked to the folks who were at the company. Luckily, you're right. We were working down below them. They were a floor above. What did that process go like, though, whenever they were like, yeah, we're hiring for a senior Rails position? What did they say to you to get you in the interview process? I mean, what did that whole, I guess, period of time look like?
Yeah, so I don't even think I got a call until I started talking to the people upstairs because I applied, hadn't heard anything, and then I went upstairs, started talking to developers, and I think a week after that is when I got an email saying, "Hey, we'd like to schedule for an initial screen." So I think that networking component really helped even get my foot into the door. Otherwise, they probably just been like, "No way. This guy's out of code school. He doesn't know any Rails. No
Yeah.
chance." But that first initial tech screen was just I know who Project Shift is. They're underneath of us. We've heard of what you guys are doing down there. So tell me what you're doing. Tell me what you're learning. And I kind of went through and just walked. I can't remember exactly which week we were on. I think it was near the end of the program. And I was like, yeah, we started with vanilla JS. We worked our way up through jQuery and Backbone, and then we eventually got to React, and we switched to Node on the back end and Express and all that fun stuff. And so I just kind of walked him through like week by week what we were learning. And he asked me, what challenges did I face? And I said, Backbone. Backbone was a huge challenge. Learning the differences and the nuances between front end development versus back end development. So little things like that, just kind of going over again, what am I learning? What am I struggling through? What do I feel I'm doing well? And then from there, it was just like, okay, well, let's see what you can do now. And they gave me a take-home coding assessment where it was a full stack back end, front end, like roster management software for NCAA basketball. And it was a lot of fun. And then they
was that
the next
in Rails?
Yeah. The back end was in Rails. The front end was a React app. So I did that. I knew just enough.
What was it like? Because I sort of have blurry memories of this, but so you had to, so they gave you a code challenge, take home challenge. It's that you have to write a backend in Rails, but you didn't know Rails. What was that like for you?
So the app was actually mostly built. The backend was mostly built.
Okay.
It was more like we need you to query all the players and show them on the screen, or query a specific player, stuff like that. So I needed to implement that. So just kind of learning Rails on the fly, going over the documentation, going to Treehouse and doing lessons if I need to freshen up. Just kind of learning on the fly. But yeah, implementing those things. And then there were stretch goals, like write specs and unit tests for everything. And I did not know a lick of RSpec at the time, which is a testing suite for Rails. So I threw some blind code up there and then commented it all out saying, I tried.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so I submitted that. Then the next interview was kind of going over how and why I did what I did. And then from there was, I think, another small coding challenge and another review and then a behavioral. And then I got an offer. So
that's amazing, man. And so what were the, so you get the offer. I think I remember you trying to negotiate a little bit, but it was pretty nice. to be able to be at a company like Untappd, which probably for a lot of people is a dream company, right? I mean, literally, if you like beer, then like that is probably the place to be as a software engineer. If you take things that you love, beer and tech, and put them together, which is really cool. I'm jealous that you've been able to be there. What was your first couple of months like on the job? I mean, were you intimidated? Do you actually feel like you were able to contribute much to what you were doing?
Oh, oh man, I remember because you and I were in the same building at this time, and I just remember
Yeah.
coming up to you, seeing you around the building, like that Ricky Bobby, I don't know what to do with my hands in the movie. I had no clue what I was doing whatsoever for the first 3 to 6 months. I'm just like, why did these guys hire me? Like,
Yeah.
my very first day was sprint planning. I remember this vividly because I felt like I was drowning. My very first day there doing a sprint planning, and they give me these point cards, and they're like, we need you to point tickets with us. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So I'm just blindly throwing up numbers. And then they're
So this
like,
is where you estimate like how much time a specific feature would take you to build.
yeah, yeah. So we follow what's called agile, which is a methodology in development where you kind of build and iterate. And we have what are called ceremonies, which are like retrospectives where you reflect on the previous sprint. Things are broken into sprints. We do 2 week sprints. You do a planning to kick off those sprints where you say we're going to take on this amount of work, and we point every ticket to say like it is this much effort.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily do time. We say it's this much effort. So
Okay.
it's a 1 pointer, or a 2 pointer, or a 3 or a 5. It usually follows Fibonacci.
Yeah.
So I'm just my very first day, just thrown into the deep end. They're like, here's this ticket. What's your number? I'm throwing blindly like 5s and 8s. And they're like, other people are throwing 1s and 2s. And they say, why do you feel it's a 5, Edward? Why do you feel it's an 8? And I go, I shrug. I don't know
Well,
why.
based on my experience, no idea.
Yep. Yep. But no, I mean, and then getting my very first ticket, fortunately enough, it was just a text change. So it's just a way of getting familiarized with a new
Yeah.
code base, a
Yeah.
legacy monolithic app. Because, in code school, we build everything from scratch. We
Yeah.
are in
Right.
control
Right.
of it.
Right.
But coming into a company, this is legacy code for the most. It's a new code base. So to kind of like poke around and get a feel for where everything is, how everything works.
Yeah.
Um, those were kind of the first few tickets, just like small text changes or add images, things like that.
Yeah. So at some point though, you got your feet under you, obviously, or else
Yep.
they would keep you around and keep giving you raises and that kind of thing.
Yep.
What was that turning point like for you? Do you remember, like, was there like a moment, or was it just kind of slowly over time you felt like, oh, I'm getting the hang of this?
100% the latter. It was not I can't point to one specific moment or sprint or ticket. It was just keep doing things over time.
Yeah.
There is one point, maybe this was an inflection point. We had to develop a new feature so Untappd. I work on the business side. We have a consumer app where people check in beers. I'm on the business end of that, where businesses pay us to create beer menus and
Cool.
advertise them, all that stuff. And we had a feature for a customer that they wanted nutritional facts for their beer menus. So they wanted to create a beer menu and then show the carbs, sugar, stuff like that.
That's fine.
And the senior guy goes, "Give this to Edward. Let him drive this one." And I remember having a little mini panic attack because I'm like, "Wait, you want me to drive this feature from start to finish?" And I just remember, I was absolutely terrified, but the sprint started and I said, just go back to what I learned, break the problem down. I don't need to solve it all in one chunk, break it into workable parts. So that's what I did. And sure enough, I got that ticket done at the end of the sprint with a little bit of help and pair programming. But that was a big step. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, in general, it was long, slow, and steady, just gradually taking on more complex work through time. Once you familiarize yourself with the code base and how things are working, you can start to take on more stretch goals and stuff, that you wouldn't typically. So.
Well, I love that, man. I think it's important for both. I think, people who are thinking about getting into coding, and honestly, hiring managers to hear and to realize that, yeah, maybe like your first 3 to 6 months, you feel worthless, and maybe you are worthless, but eventually you're a great investment, right? Because, now you're able to, handle your own, and like you said, be able to tackle your own tickets and projects and sprints. What's been maybe the most difficult problem you've had to solve so far?
Oh man. So I was kind of the person that spearheaded. We have a application for the Fire Stick now, where bars will use a Fire Stick to display their digital beer menus in their venues. And we used to use what are called Chrome bits. They're little PC sticks essentially, but they're
Cool.
being deprecated, so that hardware is going away, and we needed a new solution. And I was like, well, Amazon Fire Stick has apps and they're cheap. I feel like that would be good for a business customer. Why don't we look into that? And they're like, great, Edward, have at it. And I was like, oh, I didn't necessarily mean that, but okay. So for me, it was learning, about the whole app store environment. How do you develop an app for a Fire Stick? Learning that this runs on an Android, kind of a fork of Android, and then
Yeah.
to develop an Android application. Fortunately for us, we have things like React Native now, where I don't have to go and program in
Yeah.
Java or Kotlin. I can use something that's familiar and build a native Android or iOS app. So, learning those things, and then how do I properly submit it to the store? How do I get it out to users? Things like that. So that was definitely a challenge for sure. That was probably like one of my proudest accomplishments.
Yeah.
Um,
That's really
so
exciting.
yeah,
So
that was
wait,
cool.
did you suggest to use the Fire Stick?
Yeah, when we were looking at hardware, it was either like Intel Compute Sticks, which were $400, or I was like, what about like something smaller like a Roku
Yeah.
or a Fire Stick? And so we went down the Fire Stick route and we built a POC, a proof of concept. And then from there, we just started iterating on it. And I actually just shipped a newest version of the app is going out hopefully this week, where we're supporting vertical menus. So people want to hang their TV vertical,
Nice.
they can do vertical menus. So
That's so cool, man. That there is something about being able to be part of a company or a team or building software for something that gets seen by people. Like to walk into a bar, probably. I don't know if you've experienced that before. Have you walked
oh
into
yeah,
a bar and seen your stuff? You're
yeah,
like,
yesterday,
I wrote that. That's amazing. I remember
yeah, yes,
I used to my first job was at this company, and we displayed social media like at big events or on TV. And I even remember one time, it was like long after I had like stopped working there. I saw something on TV, and I was like, I made that, and that's like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
the coolest feeling. I mean, my fellow developers, they didn't seem to care, but
No, it's
but I thought it
awesome.
was so cool.
I walked in. So yeah, yesterday when I was talking, I had a conversation with a friend about my upbringing in software. I went to Barrel Culture in Durham, which is a brewery, and they use our menus.
Cool.
And my friend's like, "So what do you do?" And I was like, "That." I pointed to the menu. I was like, "That's my business."
That's so
And
awesome.
it's really cool to see it out in the wild, and yeah, it was fun.
That's the ultimate. Well, man, what kind of advice, in general, or I don't know if there's anything specific that sticks out to you about your journey, but for someone who's on the outside now looking in, because I think you probably have a fresh memory of that for yourself, right? Where you're looking at other folks who are landing jobs as developers or who are developers, and
Mhm.
I'm sure you've experienced at this point that, I mean, it's great, right? You've got a pretty flexible lifestyle, flexible schedule. You're
Mhm.
obviously enjoying what you're doing. You get to do cool stuff. What kind of advice would you have for folks who are kind of just in the beginning phases of this process?
Yeah, so I mean, first and foremost, like find out if this is something you want to do. I mean, if you're kind of toying with the idea, like don't fully commit right now, but at least partially, throw some time into it. Play around on those free code camps and tree houses and whatnot. Put some hours in, see if this is for you, see if you enjoy what you're doing. From there, if you want to pursue this full time and have a career change, great. I fully advocate for that. I mean, it's done wonders for me. Um, if it comes to that point, I would highly suggest looking into something like a project shift or a Parsity. I'll plug you guys. I don't care. And I'm saying this on my behalf, not because you're hosting this. Like, if you don't want to go through a 4 year school and you want to change things quickly, but also do so with the fundamental understanding that like you're going to be taught the things you need to know to get that job,
Yeah.
do something like this, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, they have the tools, the resources. So yeah, and commit, just commit. Like I said, I had one foot in the pool for the longest time. Like dive in.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Well, awesome, man. Thanks so much, Edward. I really do appreciate taking the time. Is there anywhere where people can find out more about you or follow you on GitHub or online?
Yeah, so I am on Twitter. I believe it is _Edward Barton. I'm on GitHub, Edward Barton. LinkedIn, you can find me, Edward Barton. So most of my handles are all just first name, last name. Yeah.
Awesome, bro. Well, thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
All right, hopefully you can relate to Edward's story. He was working a job, doing online tutorials, and then finally decided to dive in and go for it. And look, what I love about his job search isn't that he sent out 1,000 resumes. He started with the job that he wanted, to work at this beer tech startup, Untappd. He applied for the position, but more importantly, he went out of his way to go talk to the people. He made a real connection. And so he ended up applying for a senior level Ruby on Rails position, and he wasn't senior and he didn't know Ruby on Rails, but the company ended up changing up the position and allowed him to work there as a junior. That does it for this week's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. Check back next week for more episodes. And if you're interested in learning to code and becoming a software engineer, visit us at parsity.io. That's PARSITY.io.